So at the weekend, the US government released a long-awaited report about UAPs, right? That's UFOs to us and everyone else. Our next guest has been fighting for the release of such report for over 2 decades and was central to lending this topic some credibility with her journalistic work in that time. She's a journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of UFOs, Generals, Pilots and Government Officials Go on the Record. Leslie Kean joins me now. Leslie, you're the woman who forced the US government to take UFOs seriously, are you?
Well, no, I'm one of many. Excuse me, I'm one of many. It wasn't just me, a whole team of people, but I played a role.
Well, tell us about your history with the report and the topic and everything.
Well, I mean, my work on this topic goes back to 1999, actually. So I've been doing it for a long time, and I just received a report from France in 1999 that was written by generals and admirals and police officers and engineers and scientists, and they had done a 3-year study of official data on UFOs, and they'd come to the conclusion that the best explanation for the cases they studied were what they called the extraterrestrial hypothesis. So in other words, they looked at official cases with a lot of good data and drew the conclusion that that was likely what they were. And they were extraterrestrial visitors, and I was this journalist sitting at my desk in California. I was a producer and a host for a daily investigative news show, and I just kind of said, what, generals and admirals are saying this? And so I just did a deep dive into the topic, started to begin then, and wrote a story for the Boston Globe, which is a major paper in the United States, based on that report. And from that moment on, I was hooked. I just kept going and going year after year, writing stories and getting more deeply involved in this.
And has this report that came out at the weekend, are you glad? Does it make you believe even more? I mean, it's kind of a leap, isn't it? From unidentified flying object to extraterrestrial. I mean, we can say that
it is.
Go on.
Yeah, it's definitely a leap. And I've never said that I didn't make that leap, and neither has anyone in the government here. I mean, it's really, so that's one reason it was so startling to me. And just to be clear, the French officers were not saying, they just said that was a hypothesis. They didn't say they could prove it or anything. No, it was just their best guess, their best hypothesis. And certainly people here have said similar things, but purely speculative, because we do not know what these things are. But as time goes on, we eliminate more and more what we think they're not. And for instance, this report has really made it clear that these are not our technology, because they said they weren't able to confirm that they were from any secret programs in the United States. So, when we eliminate that, it's just like one more box to check off as we go down the list of possibilities.
So this might be a case of we just continually tick off the things that it isn't, but we may never know what it is. There was 144 and they were only able to identify what one of them was. Am I correct?
One of them. That's exactly right. And there are many more than 144. I mean, there are reports coming in literally every week to the task force as we speak. And there are cases that go back decades and decades and decades. So they focused on a small subset of cases, and they had the best analysts you could possibly want. And they were only able to solve 1 out of 144. So yes, it indicates that, the likelihood that they are something explainable is highly unlikely, because they haven't been able to explain them. That being said, they said they do need to do more investigation. They need more scientific involvement, and they've only had 2 staff doing this. It just has been underfunded and under-resourced, this investigation. So I think now that's going to change, and we're going to learn a lot more.
Well, certainly with the intrigue, I think money often follows public intrigue. So hopefully there'll be more than 2 staff. But you sort of have to wonder, if it is extraterrestrials, what are they doing just floating stuff around the sky? You'd think if they had the capacity to do this, they'd be doing more. Or am I just being sort of skeptical?
I have no idea. I mean, I think, and it's a very valid, people discuss that all the time. Well, why wouldn't they show themselves, or why wouldn't they do this, or why would they be wasting their time here, or whatever? I mean, I think, we just have no answers for questions like that. Because you can't necessarily look at this from the human perspective of what we as humans would do. If indeed they are from somewhere else, we're dealing with something that is so completely unknown to us that we just almost can't ask those kinds of questions and expect to get logical answers, is the way I look at it. But, they could, even if they're not from Earth, there's a lot of different possible explanations too. They could be some Earth phenomenon that we're not aware of yet, or they could be interdimensional, or they there's a lot of different possible explanations. So it's a wide open question as to what they might be.
What we can talk about what they might be, but what would you like them to be? Like, what do you
Oh my
hope that
God.
these are?
Well, I think probably everyone hopes that they're not Russian or Chinese, which seems highly unlikely. We don't want our adversaries to have this very, very advanced
And what
technology.
is that threat? That it would be a technology that we don't understand, that either Russia or China or some sort of adversary has developed to what? For terrorism or just
I
for
don't know.
drone?
Just for it could potentially be used, aggressively anybody who has the technology that can do what these things can do has a huge advantage over every other country in the world.
But that's
It
what I'm
seems,
asking. What can these things
yeah.
do? Because are they not just floating and flying and pausing in air, or have they done anything
Well,
apart from tease us?
they have not taken any hostile actions towards us. Exactly right. They've really sort of teased us. And what's interesting is in recent years, let's say in the last 5 years or so, or 6 years, they've gotten to be, seems a little more in our face, a little more provocative, because they're a lot of these sort of relatively small objects that are coming around our Navy ships, and they're buzzing our Navy airplanes, seeming to be more provocative, coming closer, hanging around longer than they used to do in the past. So it is a little disconcerting. What is something changing here? But we just don't know. We don't know, and we don't know anything about their intention or where they're from, or and that's why we need more of an investigation. We've really got to find out.
And are they, like, how frequent? Are they all different sightings, or is there some uniformity across the board?
There's a lot of variety in sightings. The ones that we're concerned with that are buzzing the Navy ships and the Navy planes in the last few years tend to be these relatively small, sort of drone-like objects that potentially have different kinds of shapes and sizes, but they're very fast, or they can just hang around for days in one place in the sky. But there are other types of vehicles that have been seen over the years that are massive, like triangular shapes or delta shaped vehicles that have been seen for decades. These are not the ones we're hearing about from well, actually, in the report, they don't go into any
Hmm.
specific events. There's no reference to any specific cases. So I'm assuming that the classified report has more detail, but we don't know if they might have studied some cases involving some large triangular objects, because they're not telling us. So we don't know what they've studied except for what's already been made public.
And what's the
So,
situation with the classified? Like, does that ever become declassified?
well, I don't know. It's at least 70 pages. I know that, whereas the one the public got was maybe 4 or 5 pages. So
Hmm.
it's substantially longer, substantially more detailed. And I guess it would be up to the senators and congressmen who receive the report whether they feel like they can release it. Maybe they could release a redacted version of it. We certainly hope that they will. Maybe it will leak. Maybe they'll tell us part of it. We just don't know yet, because it's Monday morning and the thing only came out Friday afternoon. But
You would.
hopefully, certainly the public wants access to a lot more than what they received. And I think that'll be up to the congressman. Obviously, they can't release everything. Some of it has to be protected for national security purposes, and that's fair enough.
What does
But
that?
I
Is that
believe that
because
there's a
they
lot
need to?
more.
We
What's that?
need to know. For the safety, the security purposes, is that because we sort of need to know the scope that the Pentagon has to search these things? Because otherwise, bad actors might know, oh, well, if they can search for this and this, we can move outside of those realms to do, to sort of be nefarious. Or why
Yeah,
are
and
they protecting it?
I think they don't want our adversaries to know what we know. They don't want our adversaries to get access to any of the data that we have,
Okay.
which might indicate something we've learned about how the objects behave or how their technology works. It also might indicate what kind of sensors we're using to capture the data that we have. We wouldn't want them to know that as well. We're always very protective of our intelligence operations, right? When we're dealing with adversarial countries. So it's the same kind of thing. We just don't want them to know too much about what we've got, and certainly not about what we've learned about the objects, because we want to have the advantage and prevent any adversarial country from getting access to the technology that's demonstrated by these objects.
I'm in a difficult position here where I'm sort of neutral to negative on most things and would be described as a cynic. And when things
Hmm.
move away from, you know, something that I can easily roll my eyes at into something that is more legitimate. It's kind of like the cognitive dissonance of having to update my information is difficult, you know?
Absolutely. That's happening to a lot of people.
It is.
A lot of people.
I have some
And in
text.
America, it's been going on for about 3 years now, or 3 or 4. So people have sort of gradually been acclimating to this. But I think this report kicks it up a notch.
It
And
definitely kicks it up a notch in terms of
definitely.
like the gravitas and the legitimacy of the places that are even speaking about it and publishing it. I have some
think you're right.
texts here from people who are listening.
Mhm.
UFOs. So there were also UAPs/UFOs seen coming from underwater. Could they be advanced species who existed before our species and the Ice Age? Connor in Dublin.
Wow, what a fascinating thought, right? We can speculate about any possibility because he's absolutely right. There are cases in which the objects have been seen coming out of the water and going into the water. In fact, there was a Navy video that was leaked maybe a month ago that shows an object going into the water. And maybe Connor, was that his name?
Yeah.
Maybe he saw that, but it's a very interesting speculation. I mean, there are people that speculate that perhaps these are from our planet somehow, and maybe they would be dwelling deep under the ocean in some obscure place that we've never been to. So that's an option. Everything's on the table at this point.